giant. He doesn't have his hairpiece on those. He's a giant bald man. And reaches out his hand, good to meet you, and it just dwarfs my hand. I mean, just...
Each day I share a new story from Hollywood's golden age, the iconic memories that defined a timeless era. If you want to keep reliving these moments with me, tap subscribe. It costs nothing, yet it means so much. Thank you for joining me. Ron Howard might have been the red-headed sweetheart of the Andy Griffith Show, but behind those white picket fences of Mayberry, things weren't nearly as perfect as they looked. On screen, it was all smiles, small-town charm, and family vibes. But behind the scenes, the truth was way more tangled. Sure, Howard shared plenty of laughs with Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, but there was one cast member he couldn't stand, and he wasn't the only one feeling that way. That same person ended up sparking the only feud Andy Griffith himself could never forgive. The tension was real, the resentment ran deep, and for years, everyone tried to keep it buried. But secrets like that don't stay buried forever. This is the story of the castmate who tore a hole right through the heart of Mayberry's perfect image, the real drama behind the Andy Griffith Show. The series is often remembered as one of the most wholesome, nostalgic sitcoms in TV history, but behind that soft, southern glow was a whole world of clashing egos and quiet bitterness. Premiering on CBS on October 3rd, 1960, and running until April 1st, 1968, the Andy Griffith Show gave audiences 249 episodes of feel-good television, 159 in black and white and 90 in color. But the process of making it wasn't nearly as peaceful as the cozy little town it portrayed. The show actually started as a backdoor pilot on The Danny Thomas Show, where Andy Griffith first appeared as Sheriff Andy Taylor, a widowed lawman raising his young son, Opie, played by none other than a very young Ron Howard. Mayberry, North Carolina, might have been fictional, but Griffith always said its spirit was pure nostalgia, more like the 1930s small-town life he remembered than the bustling 1960s world outside the studio. It was of a time gone by, Griffith later reflected, and that perfectly captured the show's magic. The Andy Griffith Show cast quickly became a lineup of true American icons. There was the overly eager but hilariously clumsy Deputy Barney Fife, brought to life by the one and only Don Knotts. The sweet yet firm Aunt Bee, played by Despised, kept everyone in check. And of course, the sharp and spirited Opie, the boy who stole hearts everywhere. Together, they built a picture-perfect family that felt so real. Fans were convinced the bond went beyond the screen.
We went to the wrap party that this was it for the Andy Griffith Show.
But behind the laughter and the small-town charm, things weren't always so cozy. Off-camera, tension started brewing, and egos sometimes clashed hard. Personalities didn't always mix, and one feud between Andy Griffith himself and a fellow cast member became one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets for decades. The cameras might have captured Mayberry's peace, but behind the scenes, that harmony was cracking fast. Even with all that hidden drama, the show was a massive hit. It never dropped below 7th place in the Nielsen ratings and pulled off a rare TV miracle by ending its final season as the #1 show in America. Only I Love Lucy and Seinfeld ever pulled off that kind of exit. While Griffith somehow never took home an Emmy, Don Knotts and Despised racked up 6 between them. The Mayberry legacy just kept going strong, spinning off Gomer Pyle, USMC, a 1986 reunion movie, and Mayberry RFD, keeping fans hooked for years. Even today, die-hard fans celebrate Mayberry at a yearly festival in Griffith's hometown of Mount Airy, North Carolina, holding tight to a dream town that never really existed. Because, as it turns out, the show's sweet simplicity hit a storm of real-life tension. And right in the middle of it all, one young boy from that set was already planning his escape from behind the porch swing and that famous fishing pole. Before Ron Howard became one of Hollywood's most respected directors, he was that bright red-headed kid America couldn't stop watching. Born on March 1st, 1954 in Duncan, Oklahoma, Ronald William Howard came into the world already surrounded by showbiz energy. His dad, Rance Howard, was an actor, writer, and director who took on the stage name Howard after being born Harold Rance Beckenholt. And at the time of Ron's birth, he was serving a 3-year term in the U.S. Air Force. His mom, Jean Spiegel Howard, was also an actress, making entertainment practically a family tradition. Ron's family roots were a true American mix: German, English, Scottish, Irish, and Dutch. It's almost poetic how his background reflected the wholesome, all-American characters he would later play. His childhood was anything but ordinary. While most kids were learning in classrooms, Ron was splitting his education between studio sets like Desilu and public schools in Burbank, California. He even attended John Burroughs High School before enrolling in USC's prestigious School of Cinematic Arts, though he never finished. Hollywood had already started calling, and he didn't need a diploma to know where he belonged. By the age of 5, Ron Howard was already a working professional. His first credited film role came in The Journey, and from there he was unstoppable. He popped up in hit shows like The Twilight Zone, The DuPont Show with June Allison, Dennis the Menace, and The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. Every appearance made him more recognizable. That red hair, those curious eyes, that natural charm. You could already tell this kid wasn't just another child actor. He was destined to become a Hollywood powerhouse. Ron Howard's real breakthrough came in 1960, the moment that would change his life forever. That's when he landed the role of Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. Credited back then as Ronnie Howard, he stepped into the spotlight as the sweet, curious son of Sheriff Andy Taylor, played by Andy Griffith himself. For all 8 seasons, he grew up right there in Mayberry, in front of millions of viewers who practically watched him come of age on screen. Howard once shared a funny memory from his very first days on set. He was totally distracted by a little toy turtle he had to pretend was real and dead. I remember him looking at that little turtle and talking to me about how it was kind of funny to have to pretend that it was dead, he said. That easy, natural atmosphere gave him his first real taste of acting magic, and it perfectly captured what the show was all about: warmth, humor, and gentle life lessons that felt real. Even though The Andy Griffith Show aired through the 1960s, it deliberately reached for something older and softer, a slice of old-fashioned Americana. It was nostalgic, heartwarming, and filled with that small-town glow that made people long for simpler times. With Don Knotts nailing his role as the jittery but lovable Barney Fife, Frances Bavier as the wise and nurturing Aunt Bee, and a colorful crew of quirky Mayberry locals, the series became a true American treasure. The show never snagged an Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series, but it did earn 3 nominations, and Knotts and Bavier made sure the cast was well represented, taking home 6 acting Emmys between them. But for Ron Howard, that was just the beginning. When The Andy Griffith Show ended, his career didn't fade. It exploded. By 1974, he was back in living rooms across America, this time as Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, kicking off yet another chapter in a career that was just getting started. What started as just a short segment on love, American Style exploded into one of TV's biggest hits, Happy Days. Ron Howard stepped into the role of the clean-cut, all-American Richie Cunningham, perfectly balancing out Henry Winkler's leather-jacketed, street-smart Fonzie. Their chemistry was electric. Real friendship mixed with sharp timing that made every scene pop. Together, they turned the show into pure pop culture gold, cementing Happy Days as one of the most iconic sitcoms of its time. But even at the height of his fame, Howard's ambitions stretched way beyond acting. While the world knew him as Richie, he was already sneaking behind the camera, learning everything he could about directing. His big chance came in 1977 with Grand Theft Auto, a wild, low-budget action comedy he co-wrote with his father, Rance Howard. The deal came through producer Roger Corman. Howard agreed to star in Eat My Dust in exchange for the chance to direct his own movie. Talk about smart hustling. That move marked a huge turning point in his career. During the late 70s and early 80s, Howard stayed busy directing TV movies for NBC, including the 1980 film Skyward, starring Hollywood legend Bette Davis. He was sharpening his craft, quietly preparing for the big leagues. And in 1982, everything changed again when he directed Night Shift, a hilarious, edgy comedy starring Shelley Long, Michael Keaton, and Henry Winkler.
Very first time that I met him, I arrived in Carson City, Nevada.
That movie officially put Ron Howard on the map as a real creative powerhouse behind the camera. From there, he was unstoppable. Just 2 years later, in 1984, he released Splash, a romantic fantasy comedy starring Tom Hanks, Daryl Hannah, Eugene Levy, and John Candy. It was charming, funny, and magical. A massive box office hit and a critical success. That film proved Ron Howard wasn't just a former child star. He was Hollywood's next big director, ready to make waves. Ron Howard proved time and time again that he could deliver hits packed with heart, humor, and pure crowd-pleasing magic. What started with a toy turtle and a small role as Opie Taylor turned into a lifelong journey in storytelling. Howard was never just a child actor. He was a born storyteller in training. And once he stepped behind the camera, he made sure Hollywood would never forget his name. But before all the awards, box office blockbusters, and Hollywood prestige, Ron learned the ropes on a set that wasn't nearly as cheerful as it looked. Behind Mayberry's slow pace and sweet small-town smiles, real tension was bubbling under the surface, the kind no camera could ever fully capture. The drama on the Andy Griffith Show didn't just happen in front of the lens. It was alive behind the scenes, too, and it got personal. Two of the show's biggest stars, Andy Griffith and Despised, were TV royalty. Their on-screen chemistry as Sheriff Andy Taylor and Aunt Bee made them beloved across America. But off-screen, things were far from friendly. Just like the famously complicated friendship between Selena Gomez and Francia Raisa, Griffith and Bavier's relationship was tangled in its own mix of respect, pride, and resentment. For decades, this quiet feud has fascinated fans and TV historians alike. How could two people who seemed so perfectly in sync on camera clash so deeply behind it? The truth came down to personality. Strong-willed, passionate, and proud on both sides. Their differences weren't just creative. They were personal. This wasn't a quick misunderstanding or a passing disagreement. It was a deep divide that shaped the energy on set and left a mark on one of television's most wholesome classics. It was like a quiet, cold war hiding behind Mayberry's white picket fences, a tension that lingered long after the final episode faded to black. This behind-the-scenes feud, whispered about for decades but rarely confirmed, became a shadow legacy of the Andy Griffith Show. It added a complicated twist to the rosy nostalgia fans still associate with the series. At the heart of the show stood Andy Griffith, the calm, collected sheriff Andy Taylor. With his easy smile and steady hand, he brought peace to Mayberry without ever needing to raise his voice. Sheriff Taylor was more than just a small-town lawman. He was a widowed father, a mentor, and the moral backbone of the community. He juggled parenting, policing, and small-town drama with a sense of patience and grace that defined the show's heartwarming tone. His charm gave the series its soul, warm, grounded, and quietly heroic. Sharing that cozy screen space with him was Despised as Aunt Bee, the no-nonsense but deeply kind aunt who kept the Taylor household running. Aunt Bee wasn't just a caretaker. She was the show's emotional anchor, the one who brought balance, comfort, and wisdom to every episode. With her comforting meals, gentle scoldings, and small-town advice, Bavier turned Aunt Bee into a cultural icon, the classic TV aunt everyone wished they had. Together, Sheriff Taylor and Aunt Bee represented everything viewers loved about Mayberry: home, community, and family values that felt timeless. But behind the laughter and southern charm, reality was a lot stormier. According to classic country music and several cast accounts, the tension between Andy Griffith and Despised ran deep, rooted in their totally different approaches to acting, and even deeper differences in how they saw each other as people. What fans saw as harmony on screen was, behind the curtain, a quiet battle of pride and personality. Despised, known for being intensely private, kept a careful distance from most of her Andy Griffith Show co-stars. While Andy Griffith was warm, chatty, and full of small-town charm off-screen, Bavier preferred her solitude. She valued quiet over company. To some, her behavior came off as cold or even standoffish, but it went deeper than that. Bavier wasn't rude. She was disciplined. she had high standards for herself and expected everyone around her to match that same level of professionalism. Ron Howard, who played little Opie Taylor, often spoke about the positive, supportive energy Griffith brought to the set. But not everyone found the same ease with Bavier. Howard Morris, who played Ernest T. Bass and directed several episodes, once said that working with her felt like navigating a landmine. Even a small direction, like asking her to move just a few inches for the camera, could spark unexpected tension. She was fiercely protective of her space, her image, and how she was presented on screen. Her dedication was admirable, but it sometimes created awkward standoffs with castmates who weren't used to that level of precision. According to Cheat Sheet, Griffith himself once shared a painful memory about trying to make peace with her. He showed up at her home one day, unannounced, hoping to finally settle their long-standing differences and make amends. But the visit didn't go as planned. It backfired completely. Bavier, known for guarding her privacy like a fortress, was upset by the sudden intrusion. Instead of closing the gap between them, the moment only deepened the distance. The wall between them grew even taller, leaving a wound that never quite healed, at least not right away. But life has a strange way of softening even the toughest hearts, and in time, change did come, though sadly it arrived near the very end of her life. In her later years, Frances Bavier faced a tough battle with cancer, a fight that seemed to open a window for reflection and reconciliation. During that time, she finally reached out to Andy Griffith, ready to let go of the tension that had followed them for so long. Griffith later recalled that moment with deep emotion, sharing that Bavier had apologized sincerely. "I'm sorry we didn't get along better. It was my fault," she told him. She admitted she could be difficult and even gave him credit for his leadership on the show, recognizing how much of the Andy Griffith Show's success came from his steady hand and vision. It was a heartfelt gesture, one that finally brought closure after decades of quiet conflict. That single conversation helped them both find peace, even if it came late in life. Frances Bavier passed away in 1989 at the age of 86. Though she was born and raised in New York City, she spent her final years in North Carolina, the same kind of small-town setting her beloved Aunt Bee had called home on screen. After retiring from acting in 1972, she settled in Siler City, where she chose a slower, simpler life filled with privacy and calm. Locals remembered her as reserved but kind, a far cry from the cold reputation that once followed her in Hollywood. Toward the end, Bavier struggled with serious health issues, especially heart-related problems. She spent her last days under medical care at Chatham Hospital. Just a week before her passing, she was released from the coronary care unit, though her condition remained fragile. While the exact cause of death was never officially confirmed, most believe it was tied to her ongoing heart troubles. Even in her final chapter, Frances Bavier stayed true to who she always was. Dignified, private, and quietly graceful, leaving behind a legacy that remains just as powerful as the show that made her famous. Andy Griffith, much like his longtime co-star Frances Bavier, also lived to the age of 86. According to CNN Entertainment, he passed away peacefully at his home on Roanoke Island, North Carolina, early one quiet Tuesday morning. The exact cause of his death was never made public, but his passing hit hard, a deep loss for fans and for the entire world of television. Griffith's family confirmed that he was laid to rest on Roanoke Island, the same peaceful sanctuary where he had spent much of his later life. It was his refuge, a place that gave him the calm and solitude he'd always cherished. With his passing, and Bavier's years earlier, an era truly came to an end. But their stories reminded fans that behind television's polished perfection often lie real emotions, complicated relationships, and human stories that don't always make it into the scripts. Even though Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier spent years locked in quiet tension, they found a way to forgive before it was too late. Their story wasn't about blame or ego. It was about two artists finally recognizing the humanity in each other and choosing peace over pride. That simple act of forgiveness became one of their greatest legacies, a reminder that real grace doesn't always play out in front of the camera. As that chapter of the Andy Griffith Show came to a close, Ron Howard's life was already moving into a whole new story. One not of fame or feuds, but of lasting love. Because while Hollywood romances often burn bright and fade fast, Ron found something different. A love that didn't chase the spotlight, didn't need headlines, and didn't fade when the cameras stopped rolling. It was quiet, steady, and built to last. A real-life love story that would stand the test of time. This is the love story of Ron and Cheryl Howard, a Hollywood romance that actually beat the odds. In a town famous for whirlwind hookups, messy breakups, and drama that never ends, these two built something rare, something real. On June 7th, 2025, Ron and Cheryl celebrated 50 years of marriage. Half a century of growing, dreaming, and still choosing each other every single day. That's not just love. That's commitment with staying power. To mark their golden anniversary, Ron posted a simple photo. Just him and Cheryl standing together on a beach at sunset. No red carpet, no glitz, no flashbulbs. Just the soft glow of twilight and two people completely at peace with each other. He wrote about how thankful he was for their family, the memories, and the incredible journey they've shared. Ron described their love as a river ride through calm waters and tricky rapids. And he said their secret was simple. They just kept paddling. Their story started back when they were just 16. Two California teenagers with big dreams and open hearts. He was the freckled redhead everyone recognized from TV, and she had that quiet, confident energy that instantly drew him in. From the moment they met, Ron said she was it. No second guessing, no looking around. He knew right away. Their first date was straight out of a 1970s time capsule. Ron picked Cheryl up in his mint green Volkswagen Beetle. They went to the movies, grabbed pizza afterward, and spent the night just laughing and talking. The car wasn't fancy, but it didn't have to be. It got them where they needed to go. Years later, Ron would joke, "It still runs great, and so do we." 5 years after that sweet first date, the couple stood together in Burbank, California, and said, "I do," sealing a love story that would go on to become one of Hollywood's most enduring partnerships. It was June 1975, a warm California day filled with friends, family, and a few Happy Days castmates, including the late Tom Bosley.
Really careful around him. And it's not that he was throwing fits and kicking over C-stands and, throwing boxes around or anything.
Ron had only been on the sitcom for about a year, and his career was taking off fast. But no matter how wild things got, he knew one thing for sure. Cheryl was his anchor. Still, their love story didn't start with an instant yes. It actually took 3 proposals before she finally agreed to marry him. Cheryl, always thoughtful and intentional, told him she just wasn't ready yet. She had dreams of her own, school, life, and a future she wanted to build for herself before tying it to someone else's. That independence and strength became part of what Ron admired most about her. Their daughter Bryce would later call her mom a force of nature. The kind of woman who kept everyone grounded, even Ron himself. Looking back, Cheryl said it was Ron's deep love for storytelling that first drew her in. And even decades later, that spark still hadn't faded. Together, they built not just a marriage, but a life full of creativity, family, and balance. They raised 4 children, including Bryce and Paige, who both followed their parents into the world of film and storytelling. But the Howards were never just a Hollywood family. They were a team. Cheryl once wrote that their shared passion for stories was what first brought them together, and it was clear that their love became the greatest story they ever told. Their daughters often described Cheryl as the heart of the family, the one who kept everything connected. Paige once said that even trying to put into words how much they loved their mom brought her to tears, calling Cheryl the stars, the sun, and the moon, our guiding light. Still, Ron never pretended it was easy. He's honest about marriage taking more than just love. It takes patience, effort, and the willingness to keep showing up for each other day after day, no matter what. Ron Howard says the secret to lasting love isn't just about romance. It's about communication, timing, and a little bit of luck. But most importantly, he believes you have to grow together. You've got to change, adapt, and let each other evolve, all while finding your way back to the middle, no matter how far life pulls you apart. That's how their chemistry stayed strong, how their bond never cracked, even as fame, family, and film sets pulled them in 1,000 directions. Ron often says he feels incredibly lucky, not just for Cheryl's love, but for the lessons and the quiet understanding that's carried them through 5 decades together. From sleepless nights with newborns to sunrise call times on movie sets, from heartbreaks to big celebrations, they've been through every season of life side by side, always holding on, always growing. For their 2023 anniversary, Ron pulled off a sentimental surprise. He took Cheryl for a drive in that same mint green Volkswagen Beetle from their very first date. The car still ran perfectly, and so did they. No fancy dinners, no champagne, no flash. Just the open road, the hum of the engine, and 50 years' worth of shared memories drifting through the breeze. Laughed, reminisced, and let the past meet the present in one perfect moment. In a town that often forgets what real love looks like, Ron and Cheryl kept theirs simple and true. Theirs wasn't the kind of love you see splashed across tabloids. It was the kind built in everyday moments, in kitchens, minivans, and quiet good nights. They lived it, protected it, and proved that love doesn't need to be loud to last. Their story is steady, rooted, and timeless, and after half a century, it's still just getting better. And beyond that beautiful love story lies another chapter, the one that made Ron Howard a true Hollywood rarity. Very few stars managed to leave their mark both in front of the camera and behind it, but Ron did, and he did it better than almost anyone else. Ron Howard belongs to an elite circle, the kind of powerhouse group that includes names like Clint Eastwood, Greta Gerwig, Jordan Peele, Bradley Cooper, and George Clooney. But what sets him apart from most of them is that Ron isn't remembered for his acting. He's remembered for what he created behind the camera. His directing career became his signature, and it all started way back in the golden age of television. In the 1960s and 70s, Howard's face was everywhere. First as little Opie Taylor on the Andy Griffith Show, then as the all-American Richie Cunningham on Happy Days. He was one of America's favorite child stars. But behind that charming smile was a sharp observer, someone quietly studying every camera angle, every performance, every bit of storytelling magic around him. Even back then, he was preparing for something bigger. In 1977, he made his first big leap into directing with Grand Theft Auto, a wild, scrappy little film that had absolutely nothing to do with the later video game. It was fast-paced, chaotic, and full of heart, and while it wasn't perfect, it proved Ron had the spark. From that moment on, he started carving out his space in Hollywood as a director with ambition and grit. But his rise wasn't smooth or instant. Through the 1980s, he had to earn respect the hard way. He scored fun hits like Splash, the romantic fantasy starring Tom Hanks, and Willow, a bold adventure full of magic and imagination. Those movies showed his creativity, but some critics still saw him as the kid from TV, not a serious filmmaker. The 1990s didn't make things easier either. A few of his projects flopped, and whispers started that maybe his directing dreams had peaked too soon. Then came the 2000s, and with it, everything changed. In 2000, How the Grinch Stole Christmas proved he could pull off a blockbuster, and just a year later, he dropped A Beautiful Mind. That film told the haunting, brilliant story of John Nash, a mathematical genius struggling with mental illness, and it catapulted Ron Howard into cinematic legend. It was powerful, it was emotional, it was unforgettable. When A Beautiful Mind hit theaters, it blew audiences away. The film starred Russell Crowe, Jennifer Connelly, Ed Harris, and Christopher Plummer, a powerhouse lineup that brought raw emotion and brilliance to the screen. Even before the Oscars, everyone could feel it was destined to sweep. And it did. Ron Howard walked away with the Academy Award for Best Director, While the film claimed Best Picture, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay, it was the kind of Hollywood moment that cements a legacy forever. But of course, not everyone was applauding. Some critics were furious. They claimed that Howard had left out key parts of John Nash's real life, including the existence of a child he had outside his marriage and the fact that he hadn't supported that child financially. Those details were missing from the film, and critics accused Howard of cleaning up the truth to make the story easier to digest. Howard later explained that those parts were cut to keep the focus on the heart of the story, Nash's struggle with mental illness and his genius, not his personal controversies. But that didn't stop the backlash from spreading. What hit Howard hardest wasn't the criticism of his filmmaking. It was seeing how the noise started to affect John Nash himself. To Ron, that was the moment the conversation crossed a line, when art and storytelling got twisted into personal attacks. For someone who's spent nearly 7 decades under the spotlight, Ron Howard has earned a reputation as one of Hollywood's calmest, most grounded forces, a man who handles pressure like a pro. He's soft-spoken, steady, and respected by studios for getting results without drama. But even the calmest man has limits, and Howard's boundaries have only become clearer with time. One moment that tested those boundaries came when he took on Hillbilly Elegy, J.D. Vance's best-selling memoir turned Netflix drama. It was a project Howard approached with empathy and precision, focusing on the grit, pain, and resilience that shaped Vance's story. But once again, not everyone agreed with his choices, and soon the calmest man in Hollywood found himself caught in the middle of another storm. When Ron Howard first took on Hillbilly Elegy, politics weren't part of the conversation at all. Back then, J.D. Vance wasn't a senator, wasn't in politics, and had no campaign agenda, and that suited Howard just fine. He wasn't looking to make a political statement, he just wanted to tell a human story. The film focused on family, struggle, and survival, the kind of themes Howard has always handled with care and empathy. But the man Ron once tried to understand has since gone down a very different road. Today, J.D. Vance is a full-blown politician, possibly even on the verge of becoming vice president. And the things he says now couldn't be further from the person Howard once knew. The transformation left the filmmaker both shocked and disappointed. Howard didn't explode or rant. That's not his style. He's known for keeping it professional, calm, and graceful. But this time, something cracked. His tone shifted, still measured, but heavier, more personal. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It felt like betrayal. The change in Vance seemed to hit Howard on a deeper level, stirring up memories of another kind of disappointment. One that reached all the way back to his childhood. Because long before A Beautiful Mind, Apollo 13, or any of his Oscar wins, Ron Howard was just a kid, a small-town boy playing Opie Taylor on the Andy Griffith Show. On screen, it was all charm and wholesome laughter, America's favorite feel-good show, but behind the camera, things weren't nearly as sunny in Mayberry. Fans always assumed the cast was one big happy family, just like they appeared on TV, but young Ron knew better. There was one cast member he quietly dreaded working with, Despised, better known to fans as Aunt Bee. She might have played the sweet, caring matriarch on screen, but to Ron, she felt distant, stern, cold, and unreachable. She never treated him like the adored kid America saw every week, and that chill behind the scenes would leave a lasting impression on him for years to come. While audiences saw a sweet, loving aunt fussing over her young nephew, Ron Howard saw something completely different. Behind those warm smiles and comforting words, Despised, Aunt Bee herself, could be rigid, demanding, and nearly impossible to connect with. Even decades later, when Ron looked back on his time in the Andy Griffith Show, he never pretended that Aunt Bee was part of his favorite memories. Of course, as a kid, Ron didn't speak up. He couldn't. He was just a boy doing his job, playing Opie, and trying his best to keep that cheerful smile on camera. But there were moments when that smile almost cracked, especially during the filming of the now famous pickle episode. In it, Opie has to choke down jar after jar of Aunt Bee's awful homemade pickles. Viewers laughed. It was one of the show's funniest scenes. But behind the scenes, Ron was miserable. What fans didn't know was that he hated pickles in real life. So having to eat them over and over again for multiple takes, pure torture. And to make things worse, he had to do it while acting opposite Bavier, who gave him nothing but cold professionalism. That combination, the exhaustion, the tension, and the pressure to keep smiling, left a mark that never completely faded. Years later, crew members and insiders quietly confirmed what many had suspected. Ron and Frances Bavier simply didn't get along. She wasn't mean or cruel, just distant, icy, and untouchable. Ron never held a grudge, but the memory stayed with him. It wasn't about anger. It was about understanding. He learned early what it felt like to work beside someone who made you feel small, unseen, or dismissed. So when decades later, J.D. Vance started speaking in ways that clashed with the raw, human story Ron had once tried to tell through hillbilly elegy, that old feeling came flooding back. It wasn't just political. It was personal. Once again, Ron felt that same sting of disconnection, that sense of trying to build something meaningful with someone who'd changed into a stranger before his eyes. This wasn't just about politics for Ron Howard. It was about trust, empathy, and the shock of realizing that someone you once believed in had turned into a stranger. He didn't need to blast anyone publicly or make fiery statements. His quiet disappointment said everything. The silence between his words carried more weight than any headline ever could. Years earlier, Howard had already learned the cost of telling someone else's story. When A Beautiful Mind swept the Oscars, the praise was huge. But so was the backlash. Critics called him out for leaving out parts of John Nash's life, questioning whether he had softened the truth too much. It was a painful reminder that when you step into someone else's story, but especially a complicated one, there's always a risk. Tell too little, and people accuse you of hiding the truth. Tell too much, and others claim you've gone too far. Either way, the storyteller pays the price. Now, watching J.D. Vance's political rise, Howard feels that familiar burden again. But this time, it cuts even deeper. Not because Hillbilly Elegy was a bad film, but because the man whose life he tried to capture has become someone he barely recognizes. It's like watching a character you once defended suddenly rewrite his own script and turn into something unrecognizable right before your eyes. That sting? It's the same one he felt decades ago on the set of the Andy Griffith Show, when the warmth he had to fake for Aunt Bee never matched the chills she gave him in return. It's that gut-level realization that what you see isn't always what's real. Howard's biggest lesson through it all: never assume what's behind the smile. A cozy show, a heartwarming movie, a best-selling memoir, none of it guarantees authenticity. People can change, their masks can slip, and sometimes the sweetest stories hide the sharpest edges. They can flip their own narrative so fast it makes you wonder why you ever helped tell it in the first place. But Ron Howard isn't bitter, he's wiser now. From a tense kid hitting his marks to an Oscar-winning director trusted for decades, he learned to choose his moments. And this one, the political moment, was worth speaking on with calm precision. He didn't rant or swing wild. He pressed the basics. Watch closely, think critically, and please vote, because the stories we buy today become the headlines we face tomorrow. If anyone knows how a character can charm a crowd while hiding the real script, it's Ron. He's seen that play out on screen, on set, and now across the national stage. So here's the bottom line. Stay sharp, stay kind, and don't get fooled by shiny packaging, because not every performance is the truth you think it is. Howard's journey says it all. Keep your head, keep your heart, and use your voice when it counts. Drop your favorite Ron Howard movie in the comments. Hit like, smash subscribe, and share this with a friend. Your take keeps the conversation real.